Hello everyone, I'm Leela Gour Broome, and this morning I'd love to talk to you about my latest book. It's called The Earthquake Boy. Isn't the cover beautiful? It's being done by Jayesh Sivan, and it really makes you want to read the book. It's been published by Speaking Tiger, and its children's imprint is called Talking Cub. So Binna is the hero of my story, and he has been found after 5 days under a dilapidated building in Bhuj after a very, very serious earthquake. Luckily, he is alive, and there they rush him off to hospital, and he recovers. And after 3 months, they find out, sadly, that he's lost his memory. Now, in medical terms, that's called amnesia. And so now suddenly he has no clue who he is. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't have a family. Nobody comes to claim him. And the doctors outside his bedroom window, they're talking about him one day, and he overhears them say that if he has no family and no one has come to claim him, well, the time will come when he's perfectly fit and fine, but then he might have to go to an orphanage. And he thinks an orphanage is something very scary and frightening, and so he runs away to Mumbai. When he does that, he lands up in the city. He has no clue where he is. He has no idea of the city and how big it is and what kind of good and bad there is in the city. And he has to discover all these things as fast as he can, because he realizes that he must earn a living. He has to feed himself. He has to find shelter. He has to be able to drink water, have a bath, make some friends. He has nobody, and he's entirely on his own. But he's a spunky boy. And so he discovers, in the process of his time there, he discovers how to go about this. One of his experiences, some of the experiences he has are with a group of little beggar children who seem to be in a gang of sorts. And as he's in his restroom at night, early in the morning, every morning, these guys come and they seem to be using that restroom as some sort of a meeting point. So this is one of his first experiences with this gang. Were they a gang of beggars? Tinu was obviously some sort of leader. You're going to meet Tinu later also. I didn't need much intelligence to work that out. I shut my eyes tight, pretending to sleep. Tinu looked tense, desperate, nasty. I didn't want to have anything to do with him. Barely had the two young boys vanished when a weasel-faced man walked into the room. He had oily hair and a pockmarked face. A deep, angry scar marked his right forearm. A gold earring dangled from one ear, and a half-smoked bidi between his lips. He looked lazily around him with mean, small eyes until he spotted Tinu. The boy seemed to shrink in size. Both sat down quickly in chairs at the entrance. I watched through half-shut eyes as Tinu dug into a pocket. Weasel-Face stretched out a greedy hand. He took the coins and cash that Tinu reluctantly but rapidly handed to him. "Humph!" I heard Weasel-Face grunt, scowling at Tinu. The man squinted at the cash in his palm as he counted quickly. "You better get your act together. This won't do at all." Tinu looked terrified. Once again the man shook his head, scowling deeply, brows furrowed. "This won't do, you hear me?" Tinu nodded quickly. It was clear that he didn't want to get into any arguments with this man. Well, neither would I, if I were in his place. Weasel-Face took a step towards the curtained doorway, looked out in both directions to see if the coast was clear. "Tomorrow, same time, here," he said under his breath, pushed aside the curtain, and vanished. Tinu collapsed in a chair, wiping his forehead with a scrap of cloth. He coughed loudly. a rasping dry cough that wouldn't stop for 5 full minutes. He looked way too thin and ill. Finally, he got up slowly, sighing in despair. Then, shoulders slumped, he left the room. I waited till I couldn't hear his footsteps any longer. Quickly, I jumped up and rushed to the curtained doorway, just in time to see Tinu moving towards the exit as fast as his bony long legs could carry him. I was sure by now that I had witnessed a gang of thieves. Weasel Face must be their awful boss. He seemed to have a scary hold on these boys. Perhaps he had blackmailed them, or perhaps he looked after them in some twisted sort of way. I decided that if I was to use this restroom, I had to make sure that Weasel Face and I never crossed paths. The man was no ordinary criminal. He was the kind the ward kids and I had watched on TV, the sort that played underworld mafia type characters. I was certain the man wouldn't hesitate to commit all sorts of rotten crimes. So this is what happens in the beginning. This is one of his first experiences with that gang, and he realizes I shouldn't get in touch with these people. I must be careful that I don't see these people, otherwise they might trouble me. And that's exactly what happens in many ways. It comes to that. But eventually, luckily for him, he also meets good people. One of them is a chai wala called Arjun, who gives him cups of tea whenever he wants, never charges him anything for it, becomes a good friend. He also goes and works in an Udupi restaurant where he makes dosas and idlis with everybody and cleans up the tables and things for them. And so he starts to earn a living and make some friends. And in the process, one day he falls sick. Somebody comes and saves him, helps him. And then eventually, to cut a long story short, he lands up in a shelter called Aid Alone, where he meets and where he has a whole lot of like-minded little boys who are also runaways, and they find out a little bit about his past, that he has no family and that he's looking for them but he doesn't know where they are. And there are a whole lot of adults who look after these kids too. One of them is Danta Bhai. Within a few months, I had found myself a special position in the evening sessions with Dantabai and my gang. As the old man told his stories, I would add a series of sound effects from doors creaking to blood-curdling yells and screams, bangs, gunshots, dogs barking, whining, yowling, trains hooting, clacking, crashes, and so on. Most of the time, the gang would be listening spellbound because Dantabai was a storyteller and he would add to all the sound effects. Enjoying all my impromptu sound effects. I even had a few tools to assist me with the sound effects, and most of them were really pretty authentic. Sometimes, however, I failed to produce the corresponding sound, and the boys would collapse in a heap of guffaws, laughing their heads off in merriment. Dantabai would have to pause, and if you were quick, you'd notice a very slight uplifting at the corners of his mouth before he clacked his dentures and continued again. One night, Dantabai had a sore throat, and as the Toli, that's my gang of boys in the orphanage there, in that shelter there, gathered around his rickety rocking chair, and he turned to me. Are Bhinna, he began. Why don't you tell them one of your stories, huh? I thought for a split second, then squatted down at Dantabai's feet. Yes, I did have a story to tell. The Toli boys were my friends. I trusted them enough to tell them anything and everything. You want to hear about evil Guddu Face and his gang of street beggars? I asked the boys sitting around us. Guddu? One boy asked as Dantabai slapped his forehead in exaggerated distress. I had a narrow escape when I first came to Bombay, I began. I told them how the crook had tried to steal my bag at Shiva's shop, how I just about managed to get out of his clutches that time, and I talked about his assistants, the other young boys like Tinu and his buddies. I know the type, said Jitin loudly with a sneer. They're everywhere, spying on someone in the train, following them, sneaking on a gang member. He snorted, they're horrible. Some of the boys nodded their heads in agreement. Yeah, piped up another serious boy. I was like that Tinnu fellow at one time. How the other boys hated me. But I got very sick after 3 years at that job. When they found I was no use anymore, my boss threw me out of the gang. The Toli boys grimaced, swearing loudly. Finally, one night, they put something in my tea and left me on a station platform. I think they just wanted me to die. The boy stuck his tongue out and rolled his eyes back. Anmol let out a chuckle. Luckily, a policeman passed and heard me groaning. They brought me to aid alone, and he shrugged. Everyone slapped him on the back in relief as if to say, "You're okay now, buddy, no worries." Maybe we should help those street beggars, I found myself muttering. Suddenly, I had hit upon an idea. It was crazy, I know, and completely harebrained, but now I found I couldn't stop myself. So why not? I sat up. Look, you know what? Why not rescue that Tinu? I had their full attention now. Already he looks very sick, and I bet he's feeling hopelessly trapped and lost. What are you saying? Anmol got to his feet and shouted at me. That Gudu fellow will catch us instead. And he slapped his forehead in disbelief, shaking his head, sitting down and shivering with fear. But already 4 or 5 of the older boys had jumped up, looking excited. Good idea. That was Jitin. I'm with you. Anyone else who wants to join us? Several hands went up. Tantabai just watched quietly without uttering a word. I think he knew that we boys were a force to be reckoned with if we stood united against a common enemy. Nothing could stop us. Nothing. Within a day, my Toli had a plan ready. Since I was the only one who would know and be recognized by Tinu, I volunteered to be the decoy. But first, my job was to lure Tinu away from the gang of beggars. I would also have to explain Tinu's possible future to him. That is, if he chose to remain in Gudu's gang or to join us in Eidalun. Once he was convinced in our favor, only then would my Toli and I spring into action. We would kidnap him. My first But first, Tinu had to be convinced that we Eidalon boys really wanted to help him. That I knew would be a tough part. But the more the boys and I discussed the plan, the more we were convinced that Tinu must be saved from his horrible fate. Not one of the Toli gang or I would ever forget the day that followed. I can't tell you what happens because it's a long story, but a lot of exciting things happen. And so it comes to an interesting, very interesting end. And you're not going to be able to leave this book actually until you've finished it. It gets more and more exciting as the chapters go on. But now I'd like to suggest an activity which you can do during your free time for the next few weeks when you're on vacation, when you have some time free. This is one activity that we did when I ran camps with my husband on our farm many years ago. It was very popular with the kids that came to us, and we used it in different ways, in different forms over the years. So, in some ways, it was a huge learning lesson, but of course, nobody has any idea of that. They really enjoyed the activity for what it is. And I'll tell you why later on, how you can use it. So, this is what you do: you take a piece of paper, and on the top, you write orienteering. Do you know what orienteering means? Orienteering is the knack of finding your way in a place which you have never seen before and you have no idea where you are. Like Binna was in Bombay, he had no idea where he was, and so um, in the process of living there, he finds out about this street, that house, that building, this electric pole, and he uses those landmarks to find his way. So in orienteering, you do the same thing. You discover certain objects certain buildings, certain areas which appeal to you, or which you know you will remember, and you stick that in your head. Later on, you can make a map of this, and then you can put the whole thing together. So I'd like you to put your head together with maybe mommy, or maybe on your own, or with friends, and draw a map from your home to school. So I've drawn an imaginary one here. Here is school, and there is my home somewhere here. Here, right. And on the side here, I made an index with all the different things I'm going to come across. See, there's a bridge, a road, a river, a fence, a hospital, trees, lakes, rocks, and lots of other things that I've seen in my imaginary route. Now you have to draw a route like this, basic ones first. Wherever there's a fork in the road, you have to do that, you have to draw that out. And then finally you draw red arrows to show the way to go from school to home, or home to school, right? You can use this orienteering map for a lot of very interesting things. For instance, if you're having a birthday party, why do you want to have a birthday party at home and have the magician and the usual things? Go out with your friends to a park, to an open green spot, and which you have visited before. You make a map of this place, and you hide in certain places. You put in little clues, A, B, C, D, and mix the whole lot up, and then put one here, one there, and get them to follow your route to find these clues, and then put the clues together to find the treasure. So you can make it a treasure hunt, for which, of course, you can give prizes. In the process, you're also learning how to make a map. Think about it. So when you go to class next time, your teacher's going to say, "Wow, how did you pick that up so fast? I never taught you how to do this." Well, now you know. Thank you for listening. I've enjoyed talking to you. I hope you're going to meet sometime, maybe in the future, when I come to your school somewhere, or I come to your city. I can come and meet you, and it would be great to meet you in a different bookshop perhaps sometime, where I can speak with you and find out how many books you read and what you've done. Isn't it great that we have so many Indian authors and they're all writing about Indian stories? Should be reading. Read lots, lots, lots. See you sometime. Bye.